Hi, friends, and welcome to this series of Shop Talk interviews that dives deep into the creative process of making comics, writing books, and adapting classic stories. My name is Lex Fajardo. I'm a cartoonist and the creator of the graphic novel series Kid Beowulf, an action adventure series that follows twin brothers Beowulf and Grendel across the world of history and mythology where they meet fellow epic heroes therein. The newest book in the series, Kid Beowulf Odyssey, is kickstarting this month at kidbecomic.kickstarter.com and is the sponsor of this series of interviews. My guest today is Scott Chantler, the Eisner and Harvey Award nominated cartoonist behind the graphic novels Northwest Passage, Three Thieves, Two Generals, Bix, and Squire Knight. His book Two Generals was selected for Best American Comics 2012 and voted by CBC's Canada Reads as one of the 40 best Canadian nonfiction books. His Three Thieves series was a winner of the Joe Shuster Award for Best Comics for Kids and listed by YALSA as a great graphic novel for teens. In 2015, Scott served as cartoonist in residence at the University of Windsor, the first cartoonist to be appointed so by a Canadian university. He lives and works in Stratford, Ontario, where he is hard at work on his next big secret project that you are going to love. I'm excited to bring Scott onto the program. He's a great interview and gives lots of great, thoughtful insight into the world of comics. And we're going to just jump right in to my interview with Scott Chantler.
And Scott, thank you so much for joining me for this shop talk. As we chatted before, I've been a longtime fan of your work, and so I'm really excited just to chat with you about it in our respective studios. You're calling in from the great country of Canada, correct?
That is correct. I'm in Stratford, Ontario, which is about
Okay,
2 hours southwest of Toronto.
lovely.
Yep.
And I'm calling in from sunny Santa Rosa in California. And I've been revisiting your library of books. There's a ton I'd love to talk to you about, from the new series Squire Knight to the republished series Three Thieves to your work on Bix and Two Generals. Where I'd like to start, though, is like from the outside looking in, for folks who may not be familiar with your work. I think if they were to see your your books and your style, the words that would come to mind, at least when I describe it, are classic, polished, elegant, professional. All these kind of words one would associate with like an old school cartooning master.
Right.
Um,
I'll take
and
it. All those descriptions sound good to me. That's very flattering. That's definitely what I'm
well,
going for.
well, it's working because
Yeah.
I guess the question I want to ask is, like, from the time I first discovered your work, which was like 20 years ago with Northwest Passage.
Oh yeah. It's amazing how many people still remember Northwest Passage. It's been out of print for many, many years, and part of me is like kind of embarrassed about it because we have a bit of a different relationship with indigenous stuff now in particular. Like
Sure.
there's a lot of stuff in that book that I simply would not do now, but people seem to remember it well.
Well,
Yeah,
it's a great Canadian frontier swashbuckler.
yeah,
And
as it was meant to be. Yeah, yeah.
um, but my question is, like, even in that book from 20 years ago, there are no bad drawings. So the question is, where have you hidden your 10,000 hours of bad drawings? Because I haven't seen one yet.
Well, I beg to differ on the no bad drawings. It's tough to look at my old work. I'm sure you're probably the same. Like, anything you drew more than about 10 minutes ago, you're just like, yeah, wish I could go back and take another swing at that. And even 25 years into my career, and at 54 years old, I'm still like, oh man, like, when am I going to get good at this? But yes, it's gratifying to know people still dig that book. And yeah, and as with any of us, like when we look at our old work, we just see the mistakes, right? And the older the book, the more the mistakes. So to me, my 10,000 hours are on full display in that book, and a lot of my other books, even up to ones that are fairly current. But yeah, it's good to know not everyone else sees them.
Yeah, I mean, we are our own worst critics. That's for sure.
Definitely, I've gotten to be a little more cool with it uh, over the years. just in terms of, you know, just being able to look at older stuff and be like, well, that was the best I could do at the time, and forgive myself for it, you know, instead of holding, you know, my 2006 self to my 2026 standards. I'm able to let it go a bit, but that has taken some time and distance for sure.
Yeah, I bet, and I have that every now and then. I'll be at tabling at a show, and there's the new book, and then there's the old books, but they're all part of the same series. And during the downtimes, you'll pick one up as you're pitching it and leaf through, and like, yeah, I did okay. This is,
Yeah.
it doesn't impugn the story. It didn't get the point across. I wish I could do better, but that's who I was at the time.
Yeah.
Um,
It's important to be gentle on ourselves. But I didn't break into comics until I was about 30, which so it could be worse, is what I'm saying. Like, there could be just a ton of even worse work out there that I did in my 20s. And there is certainly a lot of amateur stuff. Fortunately, not stuff that had any kind of print run that a lot of people would know it, or be sitting on a copy somewhere. But yeah, I spent most of my 20s in commercial illustration. So, I got my time in, and my hours in, and my practice in, and, developed a fairly sort of polished style, I guess, kind of away from comics. So, if I did show up in the comics business kind of, ready to roll, that's why.
okay.
So I had already put some time in elsewhere, getting things tuned up. If we're accepting that my early work in comics was tuned up, which I don't necessarily agree with.
Well, that's my working premise. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, I mean, if I could drill down a little bit more into the drawing style, because if I were to break it down sort of on that thread of the way that everything's so polished, like I would see some Will Eisner in your work, some Kniff,
Oh,
Alex Toth, Jeff Smith, even Darwin Cook. Like, are those names? Okay. I mean, is that a conscious thing you're working toward? Like, where who would you name as?
Particularly Will Eisner. That's
Okay.
my guy. That's who I've been trying to be since I was about 19, when I really discovered Will Eisner. And another, I mean, all the names you mentioned are great, but also Jeff Smith. Bone in its original black and white indie comics form came out when I was about 21, just starting to try to do this for real. And, you probably remember that, the 90s weren't necessarily a great time for, I wasn't into a lot of what was happening with Marvel and DC and even early Image and, that style, and just really kind of teeth grittingly exploitative comics that were going on. But Jeff Smith came into that world and was just like a breath of fresh air. He was like Walt Kelly reincarnated. It was, God bless that guy for having the balls to just do something completely different than anyone else was doing. And of course, the industry has very much gone his way in the last 20 years with the success of Bone in color, with Scholastic in the book market. But at the time, he was just out there alone, against just a wave of garbage. So yeah, that he was also a really big. Those are my 1 and 2. You named my favorite all-time and favorite living cartoonist in that list. So very, very perceptive of you. And you also mentioned my late friend Darwin Cook, who I think of him as more a contemporary, even though he was 10 years older than me. But when I first started doing comics, he was the first kind of well-known comics creator who really noticed my work and was encouraging. And yeah, he was, I don't quite want to say a mentor, but, almost like a kind of an older brother figure, who was encouraging while also giving you a bit of a shot in the arm. So I'll happily take that comparison as well.
Yeah, on the Darwin side of things, I met him briefly once at a WonderCon. Such a class act, and he signed a piece of art for me. I always loved his book, New Frontiers to what he did with Parker.
Yeah, New Frontiers
the
is my
Star
favorite.
Tumbler.
Yeah, New Frontier is my favorite superhero story.
Is there a better one?
Yeah, just given all the decades of superhero material out there, I think that one's the best. Yeah.
When I think of what the comics world lost when we lost him, it's just he was such a good storyteller and a maverick, and just sort of, as you say, going his own way and telling us, dragging the rest of us along, kicking and screaming in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. People, when Darwin comes up, people either had a kind of a really good experience or a bad experience with him. I had nothing but good experiences. He's got a bit of a reputation to this day of, being a bit of a hard ass, but, that was only, to people who kind of deserved it. If you had a bad experience with Darwin, I guarantee you earned it somehow. But yeah, he was always so good to me. He was an artist, and a man of real integrity. And like I say, if you were getting pushback from him, it was probably for good reason.
Yeah, and I get the impression, well, and I see this with your work as well, and I don't know, is it fair to say a man out of time, in the sense of those influences we named, of sort of the era that you're sort of hearkening to in his work and then in your own work? You have a great love of the pulps that I've seen in your work. Are those things that you have always loved? Were they things you discovered along the way in your career? What drew you to those sorts of, this kind of early 20th century pop culture, if you will?
I think they're things I've always loved. At least I can't remember a time when I wasn't into all that stuff and a kind of a certain aesthetic. I think mostly, though, I kind of try to avoid trendiness. And this isn't just in my work, but it's in, how I dress and the music I listen to and, the movies I like. And I really find just across the board, I like stuff that has stood the test of time a little bit. Like sometimes it'll take new music and stuff maybe 3 or 4 years to kind of reach me. Part of that's my age, but part of it is also just, like I was that way when I was 17. I kind of, it takes a while for things to kind of present themselves as, oh, this thing over here is going to last, right? So yeah, with my work, I've never really been interested, with all of that in mind, in, chasing trends. Like on one hand, I've been very lucky to have come into comics at the time I did, because like my first graphic novel, Days Like This, with writer Jay Torres, was published in 2003, which was the big kind of breakthrough year for graphic novels in bookstores, you may remember. And so my entire career in comics has been very much a book market graphic novel career, which suits me just fine. I don't think I would have ever been happy as a monthly superhero comics artist, even if my style suggested that, which it really does not. I would have had to make all kinds of concessions and stuff. So on one hand, I feel very much like a comics creator of this era, in that, book market, widest possible audience that I can find, graphic novel length as opposed to monthly comics. But on the other hand, like you say, I am constantly going for a kind of a, classic vibe. I really want books that don't necessarily feel of a current trend or of the current moment. I want to create books that feel like they could have come out 50 years ago or might come out 50 years from now and would be largely the same book. like I say, that is just kind of my vibe, whether it's comics or books or movies or music or clothes or anything. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of both. It's one or the other. It's one and the other, I guess.
Right. Well, and I would say your newest book series, Squire Knight, which is published by First Second.
Yep.
Great series.
Thank you.
I gobbled them up and passed them on to my nephews, who have gobbled them up and are asking for more. So then I passed them Three Thieves, because it's sort of in the same,
Right.
oeuvre, genre and such. And those are being republished now by Paper Cuts, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Really nice to have those back, by the way. They were also out of print for a little while, and those I did mind that they were out of print, because I spent a good decade of my career on those, and other than the first book, which did really well, the rest kind of disappeared a little bit. And they've always been very popular in libraries and have always had a readership, but the downside to that is sales sometimes suffer. You got a bajillion people each reading the same copy. That's like, it doesn't do a great, it's not great for my royalties. But it got to the point where people were emailing me all the time being like, where can we get the Three Thieves books? Because people would read them and want their own copies or whatever. And for years I didn't know what to tell people, because there was really people were getting like secondhand library copies, or even stealing copies from the library. In some cases, people would brag about that, and I'd be like, well, I'm flattered, but don't steal books from the library.
You're maybe learning the wrong lessons from Three Thieves.
Yeah, exactly. But because of the Squire Knight books that you mentioned, and those have done fairly well, again, especially the first one, that we were able to get the Three Thieves back out there, which has been great. Yeah, it's great for those books to be having a bit of a second life. And it's been long enough that I'm now I'm starting to get emails. I was like, I read the Three Thieves, and now I'm buying copies for my kids, and hoping they'll grow into them soon, and that's all really fun.
And they're in two distinct separate worlds, correct? Like,
yes,
they're both fantasy settings, but just distinct from each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
They have a similar kind of vibe. Squire Knight is a bit of a spiritual sequel to Three Thieves, but in no ways a direct sequel of any sort.
Yeah. The Knights on Horseback setting, it seems like one that you're very comfortable in.
Yeah. I like, particularly once I started having children. My older son was born in 2003, and I, just about the time my comics career was getting started. And I never envisioned myself as a children's cartoonist or a fantasy creator in any way. But my son got to that age, as kids do, where they're really into knights and castles and stuff. And my son, when he was maybe 3 or 4, asked for a story with a castle in it. And so that gets your writer brain going. Like, well, who lives in this castle and what's their problem? And pretty soon you've got 7 books, and it's a decade later. So that's all I have to say about that. Like I said, not what I planned for my career, but
right.
You have kids, and you just want to do anything to entertain them. Yeah, pretty soon you're doing this elaborate series about people on the run from a bunch of knights.
Well, so what I was struck by, so the most recent volume that come out on the from Paper Cuts is what number in the series? Is it 4 or 5?
4 came out in February. Number 5, Pirates of the Silver Coast, is due out in early June. So maybe by the time people are seeing this video, it'll be.
Oh, that's great timing. Yeah, I'll throw a link in and the cover for that, so people can spot it.
But each one, cool having them come out every season like this, because it seems really fast. Because I'm used to having to make the books before they come out. It's been really nice to just have all this work that was done years ago, and we can just roll the books out, like one a season. It's been great.
Yeah. No, I bet. Well, I was going to ask because when I reread them recently, they're all about like 120 pages. I feel like that, does that sound about
Yeah,
right?
they're like most of them are 112, which is the most.
112. Okay.
Yeah, the original publisher, that's as many pages as they would let me do in full color.
Okay.
It was a cost thing, and there's one or two that are a little longer, and at least one that's a little shorter. But that's kind of that's kind of the ballpark. Most of them are 112 pages.
Well, so I guess my question is they're very concise, and even though they're all part of a broader narrative, there's each book is it's a full story that's very satisfying. And so I guess my question is, your son asks for a story about knights and castles. You come up with this. Did you map out the entire thing, or did you sort of go book to book and kind of figure out, oh well, how what adventure will Dessa and the crew get into this time?
I did map out the entire thing, but fairly loosely, which is kind of how I do it. That's the kind of writer I am. It's about a 50-50 split between planning and improvisation. I need to have just enough outlined to be able to feel confident improvising the rest. Like I say, for me, that's about half. Other writers, your mileage is going to vary, but after we did the first book, my original editor on the series, a lady named Karen Lee, suggested that I outline, at least do like a springboard outline for every book. And I did that. And that was really valuable because then her and I both knew where I was going, for the rest of the time. And that was very good. And honestly, yeah, it was always the intention to have each book kind of stand alone, but to, like you say, slot into also a larger narrative. My inspiration for that was The Fugitive, which
Really?
I'm aging myself here for your audience, but like afternoon TV in the 70s growing up, everything was a repeat from the 60s. And so there was a lot of Batman, the Adam West Batman, the Monkees, and I loved The Fugitive, which, if people have seen the movie or any of the remakes or anything, people know it's about a doctor who's been falsely accused of murder and is on the run from the marshals who are trying to bring him back while also chasing down the real killer. And I always thought from a really early age that was just the most exciting story setup I thought I'd ever heard. Like chasing someone while being chased. I mean, it practically writes itself. So when I was outlining the Three Thieves series, I actually went back and rewatched a bunch of Fugitive episodes and okay, can I spin this like in a fantasy setting? I picked 6 or 7 episodes that would work in a fantasy setting and really just set about transposing them. Yeah, I owe a lot of that series to I think Roy Huggins is the guy who created The Fugitive.
Okay.
Here's to Roy.
That's such a fun little nugget of because I never really thought about but that conceit of being on the run and and just the idea of a chase is such a great mechanism to propel you forward through a narrative, and then when you've got two chases on top of each other,
your protagonist can almost catch the person they're chasing, or they can almost get caught by the person chasing them, or on rare occasions they can all be in the same place at once. And there's just so many cool possibilities. It's it was a lot of fun to play with.
The other thing,
and you wrote an introduction for volume 6, I think, The Dark Island.
The Dark, yes, that was super fun.
Yes, thank you for doing it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily want an introduction every volume, but they sort of insisted on it. And for the first couple, I mean, the introductions were really nice, but they're from people who didn't really know me or know my work. And so after that, I'm like, let's get people who actually like know my work a little bit. So I made them a list of like, here's people who would be cool to have introductions by, and you were one of them. So definitely happy you were able to do that.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And it was really fun to just, well, again, revisit the whole series, see it from a perspective of like, you published them in the early aughts, as they call them, and now it's like almost 10, 15 years later, and to see how the publishing industry is sort of changed, or even the storytelling industry. Because one of the things I wanted to ask you was, the thing I find really refreshing about your book, Squire Knight and Three Thieves especially, is all of your characters fully inhabit their world, meaning the dangers they encounter are real, the consequences that they suffer, propel them into the next episode. And I mention this because I have noticed a trend in middle grade graphic novels, which our books would sort of fall into.
Yeah.
Where you've got your characters who sort of live in a contemporary world. They're going to middle school, the lockers and the lunch, squabbles, and they have their emotional, social challenges they're working through. But then they'll enter a fantasy world through the conceit of a video game or an RPG game, or something that takes them where they play out that metaphor. And that's kind of the conceit. And it's clever the first time around. Now I'm seeing it again and again and again, and truthfully, it bugs me. And I don't know if you have any strong opinions about that, but it's sort of like, what happened to just like your young characters being immersed in the world from the get-go?
Yeah, there's a hobbit who lives in a hole, and we're off to the races. Yeah, we don't have to get them there from high school or something.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. And trends come and go, and it kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about kind of trying to avoid trendiness and stick with something more classic when I can. But yeah, when I started doing Three Thieves, like I started writing that first one in 2006, and it was published in 2010, which gave me lots of lead time to get the rest of the series up and running. Weren't a lot of comics, graphic novels, for that age group, but Bone had come out and was doing great, and at least Bone had come out in color, I mean, from Scholastic, and was selling millions of copies. And so suddenly every publisher, every book publisher wanted something like it. So I benefited from a trend there, or at least very good timing. But yeah, you're right. Like in the years since then, middle grade and YA book market graphic novels are just like, I don't know if I want to call it a glut. Yeah, maybe I do. I want to call it a glut, like fantasy or otherwise, because a lot of people are trying to be Raina Telgemeier, but there's still, a lot of people, going the fantasy route and doing that kind of material. And it's a lot harder to stand out than it used to be. That's for sure. I mean, Squire and Knight, definitely came out into a crowded market that Three Thieves did not. There wasn't much like Three Thieves when it first arrived, and that was both a blessing and a curse in a different way. But yeah, I totally know what you mean. But again, it speaks to the fact that I'm just kind of going to do my thing regardless. Sometimes it's good timing in the market, and sometimes it's bad timing in the market. I'll just leave all that to chance and just tell my little stories about people running around and
from
doing crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, from the point of view, because you work in, all of your books have publishers, and so you're working with, I presume, agents and editors, especially when you're pitching something. So, I mean, do they just know, okay, Scott is not a guy who's going to go with trends, and what he presents us is a very particular POV, or do you have to fight against that? Like, what's your approach to when you have a new idea and you want to bring it out into the world? Do you have to fight the trends, I guess, is the question.
My agent, Samantha Haywood, who's the president of Transatlantic here in Canada. Shout out to Sam. To her credit, has never told me one of my pitches was not commercial enough, or should do this, or there should be a talking dog, or it should end with a musical number, or there's I don't know if she knows better or is just a smart enough editor to have like a smart agent, like a good editor knows to bring on the right people and then hopefully stay out of their way. Sam and I have been working together since 2017, and she knew my work and liked my work, and the last thing she wanted was to change my work, but what she does want to do is sell it, to the best publisher she can find for the biggest advance, which is also coincidentally what I want her to do. So it works out great. As with editors, you get, there's a real variety of editors out there. There's some that are really hands-on, like I say, so there's some that are really hands-off. I've worked with every kind of editor you could imagine, and some have been wonderful and some have been a pain in the ass. I won't mention any names. Like I say, the best ones for me are ones that kind of understood my work and then stay out of my way once they've hired me. But I'm also happy to kind of defend, my choices. Sometimes it's good to have to defend your choices to someone who's questioning them, because, even if you're right, it gives you an opportunity to, think about why you wanted it that way to begin with, and having to defend it to somebody else. Sometimes you end up, crystallizing your argument in favor of it. And if not, then maybe it's something you should get rid of to begin with. I've had both. I'm happy to listen to editors when they're right, and I'm even happier to listen to them when I'm right.
When you're developing your stories, are you a script first guy? Are you a thumbnails and writing at the same time kind of guy? Like, what's your approach to breaking down a story?
So I definitely am script first. Some cartoonists think I'm nuts, but I really need to understand what the story is in a deep way before I start drawing. Now, like I say, other cartoonists can only think with a pencil in their hand while it's moving. And more power to them. If that's how you think, then that's how you're going to want to work. But me, I need to put my writer hat on, get all, plot, structure, character, theme, all that worked out before putting pencil to paper. Now, that said, throughout my career, like my early scripts, very early days, like the 3 Thieves scripts, for instance, were very finished, detailed scripts, full script, and probably, at least 2 or 3 drafts of them. As time has gone on, my scripts have gotten looser. There's still a script, but it's mostly, dialogue and a bit of a description of the action for my editor's sake so that they can tell what's going on. But more and more, I'm trusting myself to kind of figure out, certainly page breaks and panel breaks and stuff like that on the page, like on the comics page. So more experience and more confidence, I have started leaving more storytelling to the thumbnail stage. But like if that makes sense. But like I say, that has only come with a substantial amount of experience and confidence.
I'm a script first person too.
Okay, we got that in common too.
Yeah. But I imagine, like, maybe does that sort of then put, when you're ready to do the thumbnails, you're fully engaged with the graphic part of it, because you actually do some pretty unique and varied layouts. I'm thinking of there's a great, I think it's a double page spread in Squire Knight, and you've broken up the panels in a really interesting way, and you're leading the reader through, maybe it's like a forest glade. I don't know if you're thinking of the one if I'm describing the one I'm thinking of, but that's something.
Is it from the second book?
I think so, because the patina's green.
Yes. Okay. That's book 2. I wanted those books to be almost color coded, like Darwin Cook's Parker books, which are very limited color, and the secondary color changes every book. I wanted people to know which book they were looking at by the color palette.
I bring that one up because it's sort of a layout that you couldn't, I feel like you were finding that on the page. You couldn't necessarily script that, could you?
No, that wouldn't have been in the script. That would have been something I figured out in thumbnails. I don't know what the script said exactly, but I'm sure it had the dialogue, and it was 2 pages of them traveling. And then when I got to the thumbnails, I was like, well, here's what the traveling looks like. And, those long, thin panels to kind of suggest how long it's taking and stuff like that. I'm of 2 minds about layout, because, I am a formalist to some extent, and I do want to, I don't want every page to be the same. I want to, play around with it a little bit, especially, given how long I've been doing this and how many pages there are behind me. I'm always looking to try something new. I also don't like to show off. A lot of people are like, hey, look at me, I'm being formalistic over here. You know what I mean? To me, it's of paramount importance that these things be readable, particularly to someone, and this is doubly important if your audience includes children, especially if it's maybe the first comic or graphic novel they've ever encountered. I want I want my pages to use comics language, to be as descriptive as possible, but that also means being as clear as possible. So I'm always trying to balance those 2 things. So again, it brings us back to Will Eisner, who was famous for his being able to experiment on the page, and he did do a lot of that, but it was always at the service of story. He really treated each page as a creative problem to be solved, and would come up with a unique solution for it, but one that would be, you could read it from across the street. His solution was so clear. That's always what I'm shooting for.
Okay. Yeah. And the books we've been talking about, Squire Knight and Three Thieves, there are moments where, there's a bit of a storytelling flex in how you're presenting the action, which is super fun. But again, they're all super readable and understandable, and it just sort of carries you through the story.
Yeah. I feel like you can't be flexing on every page. Like I say, like it feels like every page is just you showing off. Then, like, is this story for the reader, or is it for you? Sometimes the best page layout is to just draw a grid of boxes and draw little people in them, because that's what the story suggests. And if it suggests something more complicated, then I do something more complicated.
This Shop Talk episode is brought to you by the books we make. Order Kid Beowulf Odyssey at kidbeatcomickickstarter.com. Order Squire Knight wherever fine books are sold. Now, back to the program.
That brings me sort of to the other 2 books I wanted to talk about, which were, 2 Generals and then Bix, which are decidedly, those are for different audiences for sure.
Yeah.
And I would say there's some formalist experimentation in there as well.
Particularly with Bix. But those 2 books kind of go together, because I came up with the idea for Bix when I was working on 2 Generals. 2 Generals, if your readers are familiar with it, or even if they aren't, is created on pretty strict 9-panel grid throughout. It's 145 pages. And that worked for this story about my grandfather's experiences in World War II, because that page layout has a very strict staccato, almost military rhythm to it. More importantly, it's like a ticking clock. Like any kind of grid like that, where every panel is the same size and shape, has, like I say, a very precise, tick, tick, tick to it. One of the first images in Two Generals is of a ticking clock. and that is absolutely, intentional, of course, to try to get people into the idea of what I'm doing here. And throughout, there are shots of people looking at their watch. Because I like, in as much as it's about, the invasion of Normandy and Juno Beach on D-Day and all these other big things, like I really wanted that book to be about small moments, because mostly it's about, the year of training and waiting and fear and, sense of mortality and all the stuff that leads up to those big things. So that's Two Generals. With Bix, like while I was working on Two Generals, thinking so much about the strict structure of it, I kept thinking, well, what would the opposite of this be? Like, what if I wanted to do something that was like completely free in terms of, page layouts and the meaning of it. And so that led me to music, which led me to jazz, which eventually led me to Bix Beiderbecke, who was a pretty interesting dude. So with that, again, whether your audience is familiar with it or not, it kind of, most of the book is laid out in a kind of a 5-panel strip where, when Bix is just living his day-to-day normal conservative life, it unfurls in this very straight line, kind of, staccato way. And, 10 panels if you have the book open. But when he discovers classical music as a child, the panels start to bounce up and down, within that strip.
Yeah.
And then, as later in life, as he discovered jazz, the panels start to expand and contract and bleed off the page and just dance around all over the place. And then, like, spoilers, Bix Beiderbecke was a pretty destructive, self-destructive dude. And, on the, in the last section of the book, when things start to get really bad, the storytelling compresses back down into that straight line, straight comic strip again, which hopefully, after what people have been through, when they get to that part, they can feel the constriction, just as they felt the explosion early on. So that was me, taking comics layout and trying to run with it as far as I can, in the most meaningful direction I could think of. And I'm really proud of that book. I'm really, really happy with it. It came out about 6 weeks into the first COVID lockdown, so not enough people have heard of it.
Yeah,
It was the worst time in a century to bring a book out. But like I said, I'm really happy with it.
as you should be. Yeah, and folks should definitely check it out. I mean, it is both this and Two Generals are really like tour de forces.
Thank you.
And what is astounding for Bix is that aside from maybe a handful of scenes, it's entirely pantomime. So although you're right in that, like, the layout of it evokes music, and it, even the design of it sort of suggests sheet music, which is interesting because when you talk about the military rhythm of Two Generals, like, oh, it's really intriguing to think of those two parallels. But I mean, how hard was it to do a pantomime? Sorry, I've done pantomime strips and I'm doing one now, but it's always sort of, it's just a 4-panel gag joke kind of lands. But this is a fully realized dramatic story. So how did you create this?
It was always intended to be wordless, and it mostly is. There's maybe 24 lines of dialogue in it, and entirely in chapter 2. because I really wanted to focus people on the visual storytelling that I described. I really, I get the impression that a lot of people, especially if they don't read a lot of comics, are mostly just reading the words. And I wanted to really focus people on, no, you got to read the pictures here.
Yeah.
So, one obvious way to do that is to just take the words away. But just also with Bix, early in my research, I came across this quote about him, and I'm not going to get it exactly, but it was about how Bix kind of struggles to communicate and that stuff. It's at the
Was that
beginning
at
of
the
the book.
beginning?
It's at the
Yeah.
beginning of the book anyway.
Mute to a degree he would always be. Verbal communication would never be his medium.
Right.
Is that the one?
Right. Yes.
Ralph
I
Burton?
had already had the idea that the book should be silent, but once I read that, I was like, well, of course it's got to be silent. That became one of those things that I like put on a sticky note and stuck it above my desk when I was working. And then, like I said, I did end up with a bit of dialogue in there, but it's mostly, it's entirely between him and a young lady he meets. And, for a time, they are able to communicate until that, of course, also ends. And I thought it would be nice to just have just enough dialogue to make people realize how little there was elsewhere, that Bix doesn't just live in a silent universe, that the problem is him and his relationships. So,
Right.
yeah, like I thought it would be good to at least have some and then take it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's almost as if, like, in that moment, and that, when he's with the romantic partner, that's sort of when he's kind of on his own and he's figuring out who he is as a musician. Like, he's found his voice, so to speak, maybe in a way. But even for a wordless comic that's about a musician, there are those moments where the pages just kind of explode and you hear the music. So, I mean, that was really well done.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was definitely the intention. I've always kind of thought it was, people have always talked about how hard it is to capture music in comics. And to some extent it is. But, I have always thought about my work really rhythmically, very musically, like Two Generals, like I was talking about, like it had to have a certain sort of rhythm to it. Bix has a completely different rhythm, but nonetheless a rhythm. So yeah, like part of me was like, yeah, I should do something about music and try to describe it visually, be able to kind of visualize musical rhythms and have those, transposed to the rhythms of a person's life, really. And, but in any case, something a little more inventive than just like a horn with some notes coming out of it. Right. Which is
Right.
kind of the standard comics language for music is just drawing some musical notes. I mean, it works for things where the music isn't quite so important, but yeah, for a project like this, you really had to make people feel it,
Yeah. I imagine you must have been listening to his music. Were you listening to his music throughout the creation of it as well?
Yes. Yeah. It was a lot of, I actually haven't been able to, I take a deep dive when I'm doing these historical projects, like with World War II, when I was working on Two Generals, like it was years before I could even watch a World War II movie or anything, because I had gone so deep and lived with the Second World War so much for the 3 years or so I was working on that book that really I turned down good projects that were about World War II because I just couldn't do it anymore. Similar with Bix, I listened to so much 1920s jazz that for a few years after I just stopped listening to jazz entirely. I've kind of recently gotten back on that wagon, but when I go hard.
Yeah. Is that the case for the other books, or is it just by dint of, like, these are historical stories and in some cases very personal stories that you have to go
That's
all the way?
that's the thing, is when you're dealing with a real person, it's different somehow. There's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with it that doesn't come with fictional characters that you're just, playing with the way you used to play with your action figures when you were a kid. And at least in the case of Two Generals, that person is my own grandfather, right? So it was
Yeah.
the sense of personal responsibility I felt there was almost overwhelming at times. It's amazing that book actually got finished, because there were some times I was just paralyzed by the thought that he would, I was afraid his ghost was going to appear and kick my ass. Yeah.
Well, so is that, if I could dig into that a little bit, I mean, was that a story that was a challenge to unearth? Or were those stories that you grew up with, that you knew, I always have to tell this story? At what point did you realize, like, oh, this is a story that I need to tell this way?
Are you asking about Two Generals
Two
specifically?
Generals, I'm sorry, Two Generals, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. Like, my grandfather was one of those veterans who really didn't talk much about the war. And like, we in the family knew the kind of broad, strokes of it, D-Day and stuff like that. But yeah, mostly you didn't hear anything about it from him. There's an episode in the book where he is out in the woods and is, halfway through relieving himself in a ditch and looks over and sees a German officer doing the same thing. And they go for their pistols, and my grandfather gets his first and takes the German officer prisoner. That's the story you would hear
Okay.
if you heard any story at all. But it would
Which is a really funny moment, actually. I was revisiting it just yesterday.
Yeah.
And the take of the German soldier at the bottom is really great.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I mean, it's funny because he was the one who came out on top. But yeah, if my grandfather talked at all about the war, it would be to tell you that story. I think that was his go-to. Here's the thing that it's safe for me to talk about. And that's about what there was. So I wanted to make sure it was in the book, because it's pretty much the only part that came straight from him. The rest, he died in 1997, and I didn't even get the idea for the book until 10 years later. But like, what happened was, like, my grandfather was a bit older than some of the other troops. He was about 30 on D-Day, maybe 31. I've lost track of the math, but it doesn't matter. But I hit about that age. Like, I hit kind of the age that he was during the war, and got really curious about what his experience would have been. And he wasn't around to ask. So, there's an old adage, like, if you want to know everything about a subject, write a book about it. I kind of leaned into that. Idea. And I had an old diary. I had his 1943 diary, which I found at the house after he died. And so I started with that. I read the whole diary cover to cover. And then I went down to the, fortunately, I lived close to his old regimental headquarters. And so I went down to the headquarters, and I was like, what do you guys have about my grandfather? And, so I went through the entire regimental history for those years, and they had some paperwork and stuff of his that I could sort through. And then I drove up to Ottawa. There's a Canadian War Museum there that has a huge research department. And so I did some more kind of general research there about Canadians in World War II. And just kept pulling at threads. And then eventually the real ringer was, I was, like a good way through a first draft. And then I was able to connect with the widow of his friend Jack Chrysler, who's the other lead character in Two Generals. And she had, all this information that I had about my grandfather. She had from Jack's point of view. You know,
wow.
she
Yeah.
had all the letters that he wrote her and the diaries and the, photographs, suddenly a ton of more photographs of Jack and her, because I knew she was going to have to be in the book. And so this is the thing with nonfiction, is that you start doing research and you're never quite sure when it's going to end. Because, somebody opens a closet door and finds a shoebox full of old letters, and you got to incorporate that. So yeah, nonfiction I find is quite different from fiction. Fiction is adding stuff. You're sitting in front of a blank screen or a blank piece of paper, and you're making stuff up until you say you're done. But with nonfiction, it's just you start with this mountain of information, some that you don't even know exists when you start the project, and you got to chip away at that mountain until you find the story in it. So
Yeah.
I always say, fiction is additive and nonfiction is subtractive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was it a real bear then to drill down on your grandfather's story and find that through line?
I knew from pretty early on that the story, because it was about the two of them, and because, spoilers, one of them doesn't come back, I knew it was going to be about friendship and death. I kind of, I could have tattooed those words on the back of my hands as I was writing. And so, as I was doing the research and combing through it all, I kind of had this sifter in my brain that was kind of, filtering out whatever didn't speak to either of those twin themes. And yeah, what I ended up with was the book as it exists now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and the production quality is great too.
Yeah, you've got the hardcover first printing there. That's
oh, nice.
that's
Okay.
hard. That's hard to come by these days. I see
Is
those.
it? Okay.
I see those going online for like hundreds of dollars. I'm not giving you any ideas or anything, but
Well, it's, for those who don't see it, it's done sort of like as a Moleskin journal,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
and did you have that idea? Did that come
that was
from a
not my
publisher?
idea. I will give credit where it's due. My friend Jennifer Lum, who is the reason that book exists at all, actually, she was the one who suggested I pitch it to McClelland and Stewart, who is a old-timey Canadian literary publisher, because she wanted to get some graphic novels up and running there.
Nice.
But yeah, I drove into Toronto for a design meeting about the book when it was time to start having that conversation. And she had it all worked out. She was like, okay, this is based on your grandfather's diary. We'll make it look like a diary. It'll have rounded corners. It'll have this strappy thing and a belly band. And I don't know what I bothered driving in for that meeting for, because I was just like, yes, do that. Do what she said. And my only contribution, I think, was to make it kind of red, because my grandfather's diary had been red. And it's an important color throughout the book as well, for obvious reasons. But yeah, I take no credit at all for the gorgeous design of that book, which was nominated for an Eisner Award for its design. Yeah, Jennifer Lum.
Terrific.
Yeah, terrific book
Okay.
design. Probably the best book designer here in Canada. She has designed so many classics. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which a lot of people are familiar with. She designed that, at least a few of the different editions over the years. Yeah, here in Canada, if you open up a good book and you look in the front page, you'll probably see designed by Jennifer Lum somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah, she does great work, and everybody seems to know it.
Not only do I have the rare first edition, it still smells really good. Like, the paper is terrific. It's really beautifully printed.
They knocked themselves out with production on that. It's got the only downside to that first, it's got a couple of mistakes that I corrected for the soft cover second printing. So the second printing is actually more accurate, but it's, the first one's more attractive. You've got the more attractive two generals.
Well, that's what I really care about. It's also, I imagine it's also, it's read in schools, right? I mean, this is a historical look at what
Here,
Canada was, how
yeah,
active Canada was in World War II and all that you guys did, and I
here in
imagine it's very
Canada,
important.
here in Canada, that's my best known book by far, and it is taught. It is taught in schools all over the place, and in the Thames Valley Board of Education, which is kind of around where my grandfather lived and where I grew up. It's been part of the grade 10 curriculum for about 15 years now, I guess. So I'm often
Wow.
I'm often I'm often encountering people who are like younger than 30 at shows and things. And they're like looking at the book thinking, how do I know this book? And I was like, where did you grow up? And they say, oh, like wherever. And I'm like, you read it in grade 10. And they're like, right. Yeah.
That's
They're like,
great.
yeah, it was really good. So yeah, there's a bunch of young people out there who have been force fed to generals and don't seem to have minded. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Uh, you may have already touched on it, but I'm just wondering if there's any for artists who are working in a similar genre, whether it's Bix or something very personal like your grandfather's work, like the historical memoir, graphic narrative. Like, is there a bit of advice working on those two books that you would share that like is sort of paramount to tackling something of that scale?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, I think I would say, how do I want to phrase this? Like, don't feel like you have to be too precious about the historical record. Like, it's important to have your facts straight when you're doing nonfiction, but you find out very quickly that a lot of history is, if not open to interpretation, then at least more subjective than you might initially think. When I started doing Two Generals, which was my first nonfiction comics, I really went in with the idea that I'm going to be as accurate as I can. I want this to be my grandfather's story and not mine. But you very quickly find out that, like, you'll have two sources, for such and such a battle or this or that or whatever it is. You'll have two sources that don't agree. And you have to decide as a storyteller, as a writer, which one is correct, or pick some kind of third path between them. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you make any kind of choice about what's correct, you're doing your version of history. My attempts to keep myself out of it did not work. And so by the time it came time to do Bix, I had learned that lesson and knew that it's okay for this to be my interpretation and to lean into that. Because with Bix Beiderbecke in particular, there's a lot of, well, there's been too little written about him to begin with. And the few books that do exist don't necessarily agree. And there are certainly people who just reject all of them. Like the amount of kind of hagiography around Bix. Like when I first started doing my research, one of the things I first did I went to like the Bix Beiderbecke Society website, which is a little, group of kind of armchair historians who are, trying to keep Bix alive, and, God bless them for doing so. But, on the opening page of that site, it said, maybe it still says, it didn't say that Bix was an alcoholic. It said that he was too much of a gentleman to turn down a drink if somebody offered.
Okay.
And so, you're dealing with that kind of, particularly if it's a famous person, you're dealing with people who want that person to have never done anything wrong, or, people people have strong opinions even about this entertainer who's been dead 95 years now. So yeah, I guess my just advice for, nonfiction historical material is to, like I say, have your facts straight, but do not be afraid of interpretation. That is in fact your job. Show us your version. Like, show us what you do, all of your research, and then show us what you think is true.
Yeah.
It's not a textbook. It's an artistic, dramatic interpretation. So, give us your best. Give us your version. Give us your most thoughtful, informed version, but nonetheless yours.
Yeah. That's great advice. It's liberating to a certain degree to hear it. At the same time, the way you describe it, at least your experience in Two Generals, it sounds like you were actively fighting that direction, maybe, or am I wrong about that? Like, it sounds like it was a struggle to arrive at that in Two Generals.
It was. There was a learning curve, because, like I say, it was my first historical book, and what my instinct was, and I think it's the correct instinct when you're starting out, it's like, I'm going to get this as right as possible. I'm going to write the most objectively correct, factual version of this history that I can possibly write. And like I say, you're constantly butting up against the fact that the primary sources might be wrong, the fact that my grandfather wasn't alive to be able to answer, hey, is it this way or that way? I certainly spoke to some other veterans who were in his regiment and might have known, but I certainly couldn't know after my grandfather had been gone for 10 years what his exact thinking was on any particular moment of any particular day. And there ends up being a lot of judgment calls, no matter what kind of story you're telling. And like I say, make informed decisions, but also don't be afraid of decisions. Part of your job as a storyteller is to not muddy the waters by having it try to be, so generic as to not offend anybody. At some point,
right.
You got to just pick a direction and go. Yeah.
And I assume you got a blessing from family for Two Generals and to go forth and do your version of this story.
Yeah, like I think a lot of my family were like, what are you doing? I don't think they had necessarily had a context for graphic novels of this type. I don't think a lot of them have read Mouse or any other historical biographical comics. Once the book came out, they were all for it. They were like, this is cool, look at this. And they, of course, then started telling me all kinds of anecdotes that he had told them that I wish they would have offered when I was working on the thing. That's the other thing about historical material. The book comes out, people read it, and they start getting in touch with you. I heard from so many people who were descendants of people that my grandfather served with, and they were like, oh, this is great. Here's some pictures that my grandfather took with your grandfather, and blah, blah, blah.
Oh man,
they would have a bunch more information or reference that I could have used. But that's just the nature of the beast. You don't even know what information is out there until it comes to you. And sometimes it comes to you after your book's already been out there for 2 years.
And the fellows who run the Bix fan club, do they agree with your presentation of his life?
No. I can honestly say they do not. Bix's great nephew, I think, James Biderbeck, has been very supportive the entire time. He just thought that what I was doing was cool. But that's about it from the small online world of Bix fandom. Actually, that I did hear from the director of the Bix Biderbeck Museum a couple of years back, maybe 5, 6 years ago now. And he was very nice. He was very interested. He had seen an online interview, not unlike this one, that I had given somewhere, and reached out to me to say how interesting he thought it was. And I know they sell the book in the store, or at least they did. So that's cool.
Yeah,
that's all I need. That's all. Give me one family member and one museum curator. that's
right.
that's all the validation I need.
Well, you've been super generous with your time. I have a couple of other questions, and then I'll let you get back to your lovely life in Canada. Though, the one thing, as we're talking about all these books,
Yep.
the one thing that strikes me, that, and it kind of goes back to the top of my first question, is that nothing looks sloppy. I mean, your work is just never like on the page, but then also, like, for those who follow you on Instagram, and I'll throw your handle up there, you do a lot of process posts, which is great to see, like in process drawings and things, and everything is so damn clean, and you're using traditional tools, right?
For inks, yes. My work
Okay.
is probably more digital than people think. In fact, it's entirely digital, except for
Oh,
ink.
really?
Yeah, which I can't give up the brush. I don't think I ever will. I just like inking. I like inking on paper. I love the drag of the brush on the paper, which is what creates the weight of the line. You can simulate that, but you can't necessarily simulate the feeling of like knowing this much drag and that much weight. And I just find it to be a lot of fun. I know most people are really stressed out. Well, maybe not most people, but some people are very stressed out by inking because it's the lines people are going to see. But to me, that's like eating dessert. After you've already eaten your vegetables with all the planning and penciling and rough stages and stuff. I really enjoy just having a few hundred pages of a new book to ink. And then, I scan it and bring it back into the digital realm for color and lettering and all the other things. But because those are the lines that people see, and because I'm doing that bit by hand, my work has the impression of being hand done, even though, like I say, it mostly isn't. I'm mostly just tricking people into thinking that.
Oh, but your pencils are on board, and so are your inks. So you're only using digital for the back end production, and then coloring, right?
Digitally. I pencil digitally and convert those to blue lines, output the blue lines to board, and then ink right over top of them. So, yeah.
Got it. And when did you arrive at that method?
Like relatively recently. I think the first Squire Knight book was the first one where I penciled digitally. And you know what it was? It's because of Bix. There were so many. I had been resisting penciling digitally, but in Bix there were the timing is so slow in parts, and there's so many repeated backgrounds or things where all that moves is a person's fingering on a trumpet or something. Working on that book, I was like, I should be doing this digitally. I should just be like doubling up these backgrounds and then inking them separately. Right. Right. So yeah, Bix was and I did a lot of light boxing and stuff on Bix, just old school tricks for when you're repeating stuff. But yeah, halfway through Bix, I was like, this is a book I should have drawn digitally. And so from then I learned my lesson.
Did you also do Bix as it's presented, like landscape, or did you do it and then carve it up landscape, do the the positioning of the panels, or is what we see on the page how you drew it, I guess is my question.
Yeah, it was drawn landscape. Yeah, the whole project was designed that way from the start. Which was interesting and makes for a kind of uniquely shaped book and stuff. It on top of all the other ways that book is weird, it also goes sideways.
Yeah. No, it's really neat. Well, so I mentioned your Instagram, and you've been teasing, and I don't want to scoop it if you can only share what you're free to share. But this thing called Secret Project A,
Yeah.
and it's a story that seems to include, I don't know, alien space lasers. There's dragons in there, men smoking pipes,
Yeah.
queens, like
Yep.
all the Scott Chantler things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. There's definitely a lot.
When will we know more about what this is?
I actually asked my editor earlier this week if I'm allowed to start talking about it, because there hasn't been an official announcement. Because I knew we were going to talk today, and I was like, I'd love to just be able to start calling this project by name. He did not get back to me on that, so
fair enough. Yeah,
you're not going to get the scoop today, but hopefully soon. Yeah, I have two secret projects. Secret Project A is the one that's been taking up most of my time in the last year and a half, and yeah, it's getting to the point where people are going to know what it is soon, if they haven't already guessed. But
okay.
yeah, it's if you really pay close attention to my Instagram, you can probably, no one has said it out loud yet, but you could probably guess. But it'll be a little game. Okay. It'll be a little game for people. Go to my Instagram and try to guess what I'm working on. Yeah,
it looks like, yeah, it's going to be fun, whatever the hell it is.
It is super. That part you've nailed. It has been a lot of fun. Yeah. And hopefully it will be for readers too.
Yeah, it's great. And this has been fun too. Yeah, like, thanks so much for just hopping on a call and chatting about your work, which, as I've said, I've long admired, and so it's been fun to talk shop and just learn about your approach to making great comics.
Thanks. It's been fun. And I'm a longtime admirer of yours as well. Your stuff also has a kind of a classic vibe. Like I've said before, like, you know, the influence of like Asterix and stuff on you is very you know, evident. And your stuff also just reads like a thing that just feels like it has always existed in some way. It just,
oh, well, I appreciate that. That's,
yeah, just reads like classic, you know, European graphic novels from our childhood.
Thank you for that. I love, yeah, I read Bande Dessinée growing up, and try to bring some of that into my own stuff. And which I get the impression maybe you did too, only evidenced by some of like the square word balloons that you sometimes use. Is that
yeah, I came to that fairly organically. I mean, I do like a lot of European comics, which do tend to go square with their balloons. I only started doing it again fairly recently with Squire Knight, because I eventually I letter using a font because my hand lettering is terrible, but I draw the word balloons by hand because I feel really strongly that that's part of the art, and that the reading order is essentially a part of the composition. And I don't want to layer them on after the fact. I don't want someone coming in and screwing around with it later in a forwarded edition or something. So I insist balloons be drawn right into the pages.
okay?
And I don't know why it took me so many books to figure out. Maybe because I had just committed with the 3 Thieves books, which was 7 books. But you know, if you're drawing a balloon by hand, and maybe this is also what the French are thinking, straight lines are a lot easier than curves. And they also fit inside of a square panel a lot better.
Yeah.
Because with an oval word balloon, you're constantly trying to do like, how far around and to the edges, and you know, with
break words or make concessions, or
yeah. With square, you can just draw a box around however much room the lettering takes, and just ink it in about 4 seconds. So it's how I'll be doing it for the rest of my career, I assure you, because I think it looks better and is also easier. If that becomes a sort of hallmark of my style, then I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, the round, not to go down a rabbit hole, but the round word balloons are definitely a weird, like when you think about it, to your point, it's not the easiest. We've just something Western comics has, and that's what, you know.
Yeah.
but it's not the best way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, give me square. Give me like,
Yeah.
especially if you're hand drawing them, square. Team
Well,
square.
I was yeah. Well,
Okay.
so my last question for you was like, if you had any advice for a young cartoonist, maybe that's it. That just go with square
Square word balloons.
square word balloons.
That's all you need. My advice for young cartoonists, like, is just to do it. Like, just start making comics. Don't wait for anybody's permission. Don't wait for someone to offer you a publishing contract. Just like, as with anything else, you get good at this by doing it, and doing it a lot, day in and day out. So start today, start yesterday if possible. I always, I've always told young people, like, start a web comic, anything, some kind of indie project like you've been doing for many years, anything to just get you writing and drawing on some kind of regular schedule, getting stories out, producing pages. You got to get all those bad pages out of you before you can start on your good pages. So yeah, get cracking. I think a lot of young people are looking for some kind of secret password or some kind of trick that's going to help them. There's no trick. There's no secret password. There's no secret handshake. Just start making comics and get good at it. And yeah, the more you do, the better you'll be. So that's my advice.
Yeah. Do the work. Yeah. That's great. Well, we're gonna end it there then. Thank you so much, man. This was super fun.
You're very welcome. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Shop Talk, brought to you by Kid Beowulf Odyssey. Funding now at kidbcomickickstarter.com.